Hello, and welcome back to Between the Lines with your host, Brown. We are here for episode 2, which is so exciting. This episode, I decided to do a little revamping because, as you had heard the first one, it was pretty good, but it could use a little work. And so that is what I'm here to do, to re-innovate and to at the same time deliver the same stuff that I have been delivering before. And even though this is my second episode, I will continue to deliver what I promised. And so, what I'm promising you guys and what I hope to deliver is just to bring news stories that are in the marketplace and basically tell you guys what I think the story should be. Since the news, they have, or the media in general, they have their specific agenda that they want to push. Sometimes we as consumers of the media need to figure out what is the story that we should find important rather than what the media tells us is important. So for this episode and for my revamping, I'm actually going to do a theme where I basically try to tie all of the stories together in a theme. And also, instead of basically listing to you all of the information about the news story, I will actually put that below in the description. So we can spend more time on the story versus me giving you a whole bunch of details. And then the story is kind of lost in the middle, well, somewhere in the middle of the video. So let's get started. And so today's theme I wanted to put forth is a question. And that question is, who gets to decide? I know it's a very broad question, but in each of the stories I will present today, I think that you guys will see just as much as me the question of who gets to decide. Even though I'm putting forth a story and I'm giving my opinions on what I think people should decide, at the same time, I want to put forth who gets to decide what is right or wrong in these situations, or what the story should be and why it's put forth. So for our first story today, it will be from the category of politics. Such a great topic. And this publication is from USA Today. And so maybe many of you know, or maybe you don't, but there's a housing crisis going on in California where many people are experiencing homelessness. And so the governor of California is about 2 weeks ago, or maybe a week ago, depending on when the news story was published, decided to preview his $1 billion plan to combat homelessness in California. So he started off saying that Oakland and the Alameda County will actually immediately receive $19.7 million in aid, but they are entitled to $39 million. And also, he's allowing Oakland to use 15 FEMA trailers as a temporary solution for housing. Now, he does say that he recognizes that more needs to be done, and those trailers are not enough. And he, in the article, also talks about how homelessness in Oakland has risen by 47% in the past 2 years, which is quite astonishing, to be quite honest. And the final piece of this article, he talks about trying to put forth an amendment which holds the state accountable for homelessness and in a way tries to eradicate it. When I read this story, I thought that it was a problem that really needed to be addressed. And I was very surprised that they got down to the nitty-gritty, the news story itself. But I did want to put out some information that I thought was very interesting, that even though this particular Governor Newsom, he actually started in January of 2019, but he was a lieutenant governor from 2011 to 2019. And so basically the housing crisis that is being experienced today was partly under his watch or under an administration that he served. And also, just thinking about the housing crisis in a more general sense, the housing crisis accounts for 25% of homelessness in the U.S. Now, I don't know about you, but to know that one state accounts for a quarter of the homeless population is astounding, and that there aren't enough homes. And so even people who are wealthy, they're even sometimes struggling to pay. Well, not wealthy, but middle class, they're struggling to pay. And so what I really wanted to focus on today, which I thought was something that maybe we should focus on, is this particular governor and the fact that when we talk about people who come into power, especially if they were under a previous administration, even though that previous administration does not speak for them, they were a part of that administration that allowed homelessness to continue on in a way that it should not have. There should be no reason why 25% of your population, well, 25% of homelessness is actually happening in your state. Whether you're serving as a governor or a lieutenant governor, your power and what you can speak on and what you want, you do have that power. And so I just thought that it was just so crazy that this problem is going on. And the fact that we're now just starting this conversation, but even more, that homelessness is not just a big problem in California. It's a big problem all over. And the fact that this article in particular did not talk about who is affected most by homelessness. And that is a question. Well, it is a topic that we should discuss more openly. The fact that most people who are homeless, they do have some form of mental health issue going on, or they're a veteran, or both sometimes. So the fact that men and women who have served their country, given their lives, and are experiencing problems because of that, they cannot get a house. That is such a shame that you fight for things and you don't even get them when you come back home. That is the story that I think we should focus on. You know, the fact that homelessness is a problem, but the fact that it is striking certain parts of our community, you know, as a human race and as Americans, the fact that it is your veterans, and the fact that we don't even hold our government accountable for that veterans are struggling and there is nothing really coming from the government. I mean, now there are small talks about it, but this should not be something that is put on a back burner. It should be something that is discussed quite openly and vigorously till we find a solution. At least not even if we can't even do it for the whole population, at least make it a point for our veterans, if nothing else. But then I leave this up to you. Who gets to decide what the focus of homelessness should be on? I guess for me, I think that we should focus on the most vulnerable and those who do contribute to society even more than others. But, you know, you get to decide that, and let me know what you think in the comments about it. And we are moving on to our next story, which is in sports, and it's another piece from USA Today. So if you do not know this story, so LSU, they won their championship game, national championship game, and Odell Beckham Jr. was there. After the game, he decided to give a few players some money. And then he was also allowed backstage where he allegedly smacked a security guard's butt in the locker room. So because of this whole incident of the money giving and the smacking of the butt, he was charged with assault for the smacking of the butt, and his actions of giving money has now raised questions about guests being able to be on the sidelines of games or national championship games, as well as in the locker room. And because he gave these players money, the players' eligibility is also in jeopardy due to an NCAA rule, which the article does not specify. So me, myself, and I decided to go out here and to see what exactly was this rule. Now, the NCAA, they do say that there are things left up to the school's discretion in some ways, not as far as money, but how they can handle the situation as far as the sideline situation. But as far as the money, the NCAA says that that student players need to have an amateur status, and they only specify how much a student can receive if they're in high school regarding prize money. But it does not specify anything about college in particular. What I thought was so interesting about this is this conversation about, well, the media tried to make it about Odell Beckham Jr. and whether he put these players at jeopardy. I think this conversation should be about how far does the NCAA go when it comes to basically putting limits on what people can do. Now, Odell Beckham Jr. is an alumni of LSU. He is not a current member. He is not a faculty member. He does not represent the school in any way except for as an alumni. And somehow the NCAA finds that because he represents the school in some type of way as an alumni, now he has basically broken some rules. But the question becomes, if he is really not a part of the school in any official way, then how is this rule being broken of an amateur status? Same way you can give a family member money and that's not considered a payoff. And in this case, I feel as though it's the same thing. He does not represent the school, so why should the NCAA really care about what he does with his own money to students? Well, what does he do when it comes to his money? And is he allowed to give money to whoever he wants to? This was a separate transaction outside of the school. Was it done during a game? No, it was done afterwards. It was business between several players and someone they idolize. And that should have been left as that. But the NCAA has a history of interfering in issues that I find are not their own. Same way the NCAA had an issue when it came to LeBron James and his management as far as, who is able to manage him during college as well as beyond, and so many other issues that the NCAA has an issue with. And I find that is not their problem. It is not an issue that they should really care about. Well, I mean, I know why they care about it. And it comes back to the conversation from last week when it comes to how players are not receiving money for all of the millions of dollars that are raked into this organization, NCAA. NCAA and their schools make millions of dollars off of these students. And what do they get in return? Nothing. Until they go to the NBA. And even that is not guaranteed. So how is it that the NCAA has some type of right to tell Odell Beckham Jr. what he can do with his money? But if students ask for something in return, the NCAA says, oh, hold up now. That's not our problem. You deal with any financial issues you might have at home, but we don't deal with that. How is that even fair? And it's not. But somehow they feel as though it is their right to do so. So in this same question, I go, well, who gets to decide who can do what with their money? And in this case, do you think it's the NCAA or do you think it's the person who gave out the money? It is for you to decide. And again, you can leave your comments in the comment box. So the next story I will talk about is from an opinions column. It's from the Washington Post. And so this author from this opinion piece basically says that more women need seats at the table as far as in the workplace and in corporate America. She says that studies show that diversity in the workplace allow for better work productivity, and women are more educated than men. And all of this comes after California has passed a law where every company with a board of some kind must have at least one female board member. So when I read this story, I go, I don't know how to feel about this one. And then I felt a little enraged. And I felt enraged not for the sake of, having women on a board, but I find this conversation about what is diversity. And I think that sometimes people fail to realize that there are different types of diversity. As far as having women in the workplace, yeah, that's diversity, I think, in perspective. But more diversity comes from racial diversity than gender diversity, in my opinion. And when I really read this, I just thought back to affirmative action and how affirmative action benefited white women more in colleges than any other racial or gender demographic out there. And so this is, in my mind, another affirmative action component. And also I was kind of, upset about how this woman basically said, there should be diversity in the workplace, but to her, diversity was gender, as if gender is the only type of diversity, and as if women, especially white women, are the only ones who can get work done, And I said that, it made more sense to hire Black women or people of color to be on these boards, only for the sake of a lot of these companies are marketing to Black consumers. Black consumers make up most of the consumer market. So how is it that you can market to Black people, but you can't have Black people sitting on your board, or at least people of color? And I mean, because there aren't people of color, not because there aren't women, but because there aren't people of color, you have issues when it comes to racial sensitivity. I mean, if you look at H&M and that issue with the child wearing the coolest monkey in the jungle sweatshirt, that was awful. That was awful to the Black people who saw it. And I'm sure it was awful to H&M because most of their consumer market is Black. So here you have offended a group of people who basically support your company. If it wasn't for the Black consumers out here, most of these companies would not make it to the stratospheres that they have in terms of market value. So what I'm saying in this thing is, as much as it is about diversity, it shouldn't be about women. It should be about race, because race is the thing that divides us most. It's not gender, it is race. And so this woman, and even California, I think, who can sit there and say, all right, well, as long as there's a female on that board, we have done our part as far as diversity. I think that is a terrible way to think about how diversity should be. And so I think what the media should focus on is how diversity is defined in the U.S. and even abroad, and how people miss the mark when it comes to diversity and what it should mean. And that even though things are diverse, it does not mean that it's inclusive. And that is the conversation that we need to have about what types of diversity will governments promote and what types of inclusion will they promote. And I think that really governments are not promoting racial diversity the way that they're promoting gender diversity. And so I wonder who gets to decide what type of diversity is out here and who is entitled to a seat at that table. Is it a woman? I mean, yeah, it should be a woman in some cases, but race does matter. It truly does in every aspect. And so I will leave it there, and I will go on to our next topic, which is also from the Washington Post, but it's in the category of internet culture. So maybe a lot of people know about Nikki Tutorials. If you don't, she's a YouTuber who deals primarily with makeup tutorials. And so she revealed that she was transgender. And she revealed this basically after being blackmailed about basically being in the closet about this situation. And so she explained that she was scared to do it, but after she did it, she received a whole lot of support. What I thought was very interesting about it, first I would like to commend her because it's very hard to reveal anything about yourself to a public eye. And I know for myself, I don't believe that everybody is entitled to know everything about you. It's only up to you what you feel as though you should disclose to other people. With that said, I do always plug in a but because there can be a few buts. And one of those things that I have an exception with is I feel as though that you should tell certain people certain things about you. Because if they knew certain things, I don't think that they would really engage or be in a relationship with you otherwise. And so I know you're probably asking me, what do I mean by that? So Nikki Tutorials basically said that she waited a very long time to tell her boyfriend that she was transgender. It wasn't until basically this blackmail situation happened that she decided to tell him that she was transgender. And for me, that was where I felt a little iffy. Not because she was transgender, but I feel as though that there are certain things that you should disclose because they are deal breakers. And I think that this was a deal breaker not because she wasn't a woman, but because you entered into a relationship with some type of expectation knowing that you could not fulfill it. I mean, as a woman, if a man decides he wants to be with a woman, a lot of times, it's about, sexual attraction. That's one thing. But it's also, if he wants to get married and he wants to have children, understand that as a transgender woman, you cannot have children naturally. And not that that's a problem, but that should be something that they should know for the sake of there are things that you cannot do. And for you to lead a person on with this secret that can change things. And not that I think that it'll change relationships as much as it changes how you approach things. I mean, think about it. If she never told him, they got married, they were trying to have children, and he's wondering, why can't you have children? Why can't you have children? And you knew the answer to that. Not that you were transgender, but the fact that you just can't have kids and you knew about it ahead of time. To be quite honest with you, that's entering into a relationship in my mind with a lie. A lie of omission is still a lie in the sense of you withheld information that was pertinent to making decisions. And that is not a cool thing. I mean, just from my experience, I know, any type of lie of omission to me is still a lie. And so I will always look at you side-eye when you tell me something because you weren't upfront and honest with me about it. Not because I cared, but because it just changes the way we move about life together. So in this case, I know I asked the question, who gets to decide? Who gets to decide when they should tell a person a secret about them? I think that it should be them, but I don't think that it should be, years down the road in the case of Nikki Tutorials. She had been with her boyfriend for 3 years. I find that was a conversation that she should have had before, either intimacy or even, to be quite honest with you, before that relationship became serious. Because, even though her relationship is still intact and they're working through it and he loves her and whatnot, it's still this thing of common respect and decency that she should have said something to him, just because he had the right to know. Because her being transgender does also affect his life, same way it affects hers. So that's my only thing about that one. But, if you have something different, let me know in those comments. I probably will not respond in the comments, but I could respond during my next podcast, but just let me know. So the fifth story I will lay out here for you is actually under the category of U.S., and it's from BuzzFeed.news. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly. As far as if it's just BuzzFeed or BuzzFeed.news, I really don't know. But anyway, there is this story under there about this man. I am presuming that he's Black, but we'll just leave it at it's just the man at this point in time. This man was pulled over for suspected DUI or DWI. And so the man was put under arrest. He was sat in the police cruiser, and there are disputes about whether he was also buckled in, like he had a seatbelt on him or not, in the front seat of the police cruiser. But anyway, after this man was sitting in the police car, handcuffed, hands behind his back, the police officer shot him, and the man died. So the police officer is being charged with manslaughter and second-degree murder. And these charges were filed days after um, this shooting happened. Now, a few things I just want to put out there. Well, really, one thing is that this officer was black. And the reason why I put out a race is for a reason. One thing you will learn about this show is that I believe that race is important more than anything else for many different reasons, but because race does determine a lot. But anyway, what I thought was very interesting and the story doesn't cover is that there have been so many police shootings out here. It is unbelievable. Or police misconduct. And it's on both sides, whether you're black or white, and we can all agree to this. But this shooting in particular made me think twice because of what happened. Like, what was the result of this? This man was a black police officer. He served for 10 years. The amount of time he served is not important, but it gets to basically my point. This man has served a very long time, well, a long time on this police force, and days after shooting a man, he gets charged. Whereas police officers, white police officers especially, who have probably only served 5 years, maybe 2 years on a police force, it takes them months to charge them with a police-related shooting. So I thought that it was very interesting, and the media doesn't talk about it. The media will make this seem like there is justice. But what I think the news will not tell you is that this incident is made to be an example of in a way that we probably will not talk about so often, which is there have been so many instances where people disregard what's going on in the black community, especially when it comes to police brutality. But yet and still, we can televise these trials. We can televise everything regarding the situation, like we did with Amber Geiger, and those police officers get off. Well, she didn't get off, but she only got 10 years for taking a man's life. And yet and still, for her situation, it took them days, probably weeks, to even arrest her, but they protected her. The police department, the Dallas Police Department, protected Amber Geiger in this whole situation. But the police officer in this situation, which is a part of the Prince George's County Police Department, they did not protect this man. They did not protect him whatsoever. They just let him get charged days after this shooting, and they said, what the heck? But what they're going to do is, in this situation, is try to kill two birds with one stone, which is black people's outcry for people to pay attention to police brutality and punish someone for police brutality. But at the same time, they're not going to solve the issue. What they're going to do in this case is they're going to throw the book at this black police officer. Then they're going to say, basically, we have done something for the black community. They said that they're tired of police brutality. They want somebody to pay for what they did. Now somebody's going to pay. And who's going to pay? Someone within your own community. But you will be so hung up on the shooting itself that you won't even pay attention to the fact that he doesn't bleed blue first. He bleeds red. But he's not white, but he's black. And we will disregard race so much because we're angry about the situation of police brutality. And so I ask in this question of, and I'm posing this basically to anyone, but who gets to decide basically the judgment of who gets punished for police brutality and who doesn't? I'm sure that this man will get punished. He will be in jail for a very long time. But people like Amber Geiger will only be there for 10 years, 5 probably, with good behavior. So who gets to decide which police officer gets which sentence? Is it race? Is it time on the police force? Is it likability? What is it that makes some police officers more culpable than others when they get in trouble to get the book thrown at them or a slap on the wrist? But I will leave it to that one, and I will go on to another story. And this one is under the international category. And this is a Times publication. And so, as you know, the coronavirus is out. And I mean, there are so many things going on with that. But there was this article in particular with Times where the U.S. is basically sending out charter planes to evacuate American citizens. And so their primary concern was first consulate members and their family members. And then if there were seats left on the plane, they were charging people $1,000 for these plane tickets. So American citizens, they were upset because this plane was supposed to go to Wuhan, which is the epicenter of the coronavirus. And these American citizens, they were upset because the U.S. was not making accessibility out of the country easier. And a lot of these people who were complaining either had spouses and children who were Chinese nationals, or they couldn't afford it. Now, as the U.S. had said to American citizens that their priority is U.S. citizens and not they're U.S. citizens and not so much, people who are not. So I thought that, when I read this, I said it makes sense in my mind. Not so much the money for the plane tickets, but who the U.S. prioritizes in a situation like this. And I say this only because of this idea of the Constitution. And the Constitution promises to protect citizens abroad, and they promise to give everyone on U.S. soil equal rights. Now, we can disregard the latter portion of that statement because that's for another day. Well, the comments are for another day. But the Constitution promises protection for U.S. citizens abroad. What does that mean? That the U.S. will basically help U.S. citizens abroad in situations. And that's what they're doing. They put U.S. citizens before other nation citizens, as it should be, because U.S. citizens are paying their taxes. U.S. citizens are doing everything they're supposed to do. So, I mean, if you're paying your taxes, the least they could do is come help you out in a situation, my opinion. You could tell me what you think later on. But, for people to be upset about the fact that they cannot bring, their Chinese national spouses and children, it is a sad thing. Trust and believe. I get that, and I feel for them on every regard. But I also say I understand why they're prioritizing Americans over other people, because we are using tax-paying dollars to send a plane over there and to bring you back. And if anything happens to you, we're also paying for that as far as medical bills and everything else. So, I mean, as a tax-paying citizen myself, I feel as though if I'm paying for something, the least I should do is pay for the people who are a part of me, for a part of the U.S. Before I pay for anybody else. My thought on that one. And then I think I also had a problem with the amount of money the plane tickets were, but I do understand that that's more of an economic thing than the U.S. just charging that. But that is a conversation that people can take up on their own time. And if you want to write a letter to the consulate, well, not the consulate, but the State Department, go on. Excuse me. But I think that this story should have been more on the context of what are the rights guaranteed to citizens and what are you promised as a citizen. I mean, same way this article also talked about how Britain and France were also sending chartered planes to collect their citizens. And so there is this understanding, if you will, between nations that they take care of their own before they take care of others. And they feel as though that since this problem originated in China, this problem should be dealt in China. Even though if you read the news, there are outbreaks everywhere at this point in time. Well, not everywhere, but in more places than there were when this story first came out. So I will leave it at this point of who gets to decide who gets rescued in certain situations. Is it In this case, the US, or is it someone else? You let me know, and we can talk about it maybe next week, if you will. So, the last story I want to talk about, and this one made me very happy. This is actually from the celebrities category, and it's from E! News. So, if you know, maybe you don't, Nikki and Brie Bella, they're a part of WWE. They're twins, but they're also celebrities in their own right. They actually have a reality show, and they're actually both pregnant right now. And so I wanted to focus this more, not so much on the pregnancy itself, but I think a backstory that people may or may not know. So Nikki Bella, in particular, she was engaged to John Cena. Now, during the time of this engagement, she said that she wanted to have a baby, and he did not. And the background story for that, I'm not sure why he didn't want to have one. And so she decided, since that was the case, she was kind of iffy about marrying him. And so when he said he was willing to have a baby, she decided, okay, well, then I think I might marry him. And then she woke up one day and she realized, this is not what I want. I don't want to settle. And so what I wanted to talk about was basically this idea that I think all women have of, when you get a certain age, you're trying to find the right one. And when you don't find the right one, at least you're willing to settle. And I think that is a bad idea. Even though the media will try to portray what you should do as a woman, because your eggs, they're by the age of 35, they're kind of powder, if you will, you want to get married by a certain time, and the list goes on and on and on. But I think, something that we're seeing not so much in the media, but what people are really proving is that you can have a child at any age, and that you shouldn't settle for something that you don't want or something that you really aren't too sure about because you want a baby. I find that is a very bad way to go about it. And I mean, to be quite honest with you, I haven't been there yet. I haven't thought about it that much. But what I will say is that, this idea of the way family should go is you get married and then you have children. That is a very traditional way. But now we're starting to see that the idea of what a family is, or a nuclear family, if you will, is very different than what it was in the 1950s. In the 1950s, the idea was, you get married quite young, you have a few kids, you live in the house with the white picket fence, and you call it a day. But now, as women are getting into the workforce, number one, number two, there are racial differences that can be discussed at a later time. But now this idea of, and also gay marriage, I should also throw that in. Because of all of these circumstances, this traditional idea of what a family is no longer exists, even though the media will portray it that way for you. And so I think this conversation that we need to have is, don't sit there and settle for things because you want this idea of what a traditional family is. For Nikki Bella, she is not married. She is engaged. But she's engaged to someone that she likes. And even though she's a little older than what she thought she would be by having her first kid, she's happy now. And so I put it out there for people to understand that you don't have to settle, for someone you may like because you want to have a kid. If you want to have a kid and you haven't found someone, have a kid. There's so many ways to have kids. If you want to adopt, adopt kids. Kids would love to be loved. If you, can't find someone, there are sperm banks. If you want to do it the cheap way, there are so many cheap ways to do it. So what I'm saying in this one is, women, love yourself enough to be like, if I'm not happy, I'm going to make myself happy while at the same time achieving my dreams. And so in this case, I will ask a question and I'll also answer it. Who gets to decide how can you be happy in the definition of a family that you want? And the answer is you. You get to decide what type of happiness you want. And you can end up like Brie Bella with the things you want. No, Nikki Bella, excuse me. You can end up like Nikki Bella and have the things that you want. It may not be in your time frame, but it will happen. So I want to thank you all for sticking around for this video. I know I did a few more stories than I did last time, or probably the same amount. But I do want to thank you. I hope that I cut out the ums a little bit. Excuse me. If not, I will work on it. Oh, I just did it right now. And so I want to thank you all. If you have any suggestions, please leave them in the comment box. And also subscribe. Please subscribe. I did not say that last time. And if you have any stories you want me to do or to look at, I love those. I will look at them. And I will also try to get a few videos, if you will. So just let me know, and I will see you basically in 2 weeks. Alrighty. Bye.